Welcome into another edition of Inside Carolina's Noon Dish. Got my computer because I can hear myself. Don't know where it's coming from, Don. Help me out. Got it. Got too much going on, man. Too much going on. I know you've been hectically busy. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com for sponsoring us. Don, you just seem cool and collected today. I mean,
Well, I have to bring my A game when I know and work with Tommy because Tommy will definitely point it out when you are slipping a
slipping.
little bit. But I've been up pretty early, went to a practice not too far away, Cary High School. They have an offensive lineman, North Carolina, had offered last month, a big kid, Trey Blue. So we'll have a story up on him, some good photos also. Appreciate his coaching staff, the coaching staff at Cary High School for having me. Been to a few practices actually already, so and a bunch more coming up. So, and it's I was standing out there to be honest, and right now it's not official practice, so they're very limited on what they can do, but they do have shoulder pads and helmets. And someone got absolutely depleted right in front of me, and I was like, "Ooh, I miss football."
With helmets and shoulder pads, somebody gets
Helmet,
laid
shoulder
out.
Yeah. Yeah, someone wasn't paying attention and, just boom. But yeah, they slid right in front of me, and I was like, "Man," you don't realize sometimes that you miss football until, like, that collision happens right in front of you, and you're like, "Whew," and then we got media days going on, and, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. It feels like, for a portion of the year, it feels like football season's never coming, and now it's like, it's coming.
It's here and it'll be over before we even know it. That's what's
I
crazy.
know.
But July 26th, North Carolina football players report on the first. Practice starts on the second. Of course, Inside Carolina will be all over that first day of camp and all that. So stick with InsideCarolina.com for all that. Don out there at high school practices. You know what's funny to me is you go to say a pee wee football game or whatever they call it these days, and they kind of just push each other around. Then you go to middle school and it's a little bit bigger kids just kind of pushing each other around. And then you get to high school and they start hitting a little bit,
Mhm.
like you're talking about. And then you get to college and you stand on the sideline of the college game and it's like, how in the world these dudes not get hurt more
Yeah.
often? Because it is
Well,
so violent. And then the
the other
pros just off the charts from that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. When you see a pro player in person, you're like, "Okay, that's that's why." But, the funny thing also from the carry practice, they did, varsity, and then for the last 10 minutes, they did team with JV. And it's just so funny. You see these JV kids, and a lot of them, clearly haven't hit puberty yet, and you're like, "Oh my god, this kid's tiny compared to the guy who was just out there 2 seconds ago." So there's a little bit of that. The other thing too, and I mention this all the time, I feel like you can go to a high school practice and just not focusing so much on the talent or whatever, just focusing on what's permitted, what's not, how hard they're working, what the atmosphere is like. You can tell who the good teams are and who the bad teams are because
Yeah.
it's just different. There's just a mentality there, the whole culture thing that I'm sure fans are tired of hearing about. Especially I feel like in the high school level, culture is so important and holding kids accountable is so important and being hard on them is so important.
Yeah.
So,
I
that's the other
100%
thing.
agree with that. And that's really across all high school sports, right? You can see
Yeah.
who the good coaches are. You can see the good programs and all of that. It is a big difference. You see it locally, you see it all across, and I know you see it a ton of who's legitimately serious and committed to football. We've heard that word a lot
Yeah.
over the last few weeks, and then who's just out there fielding a team, and it's fascinating. And I'm glad you're going in the mornings, man, because I didn't have a chance to get my walk in today. It's hot.
Yeah, so, well, that's the problem. I'm gonna have to get my walk in also.
Yeah.
So, too bad you live so far away. We could do it together. We could hold hands and
Why don't we should do this podcast like
Yeah, holding it.
Yeah,
We did a Zoom call like that. I got
we
I
absolutely
killed two
did.
birds with one stone. People don't know about that, but no. So I did Monday. I did Gus Ritchie's in the morning, and then Vance County, which I just ran the story literally right before I hopped on here with Tayshawn Austin. They go in the evening. But schools are smart about it, or coaches are smart about it. Even the evening ones are like 6, 7 at night, so it starts to cool down. But there definitely is a huge difference in the morning and the evening.
Yeah,
You know,
I'd be all about some morning. I'd get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to practice rather than 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Couple housekeeping notes. Somebody mentioned game day at South Carolina. We'll be doing Inside Carolina Live tailgate from the same parking lot in the same area that we've done it before games in Charlotte. That'll be 3 hours before kickoff and then runs up to an hour before kickoff. I know there's other events going on in Charlotte, but I can tell you that the IC Live tailgate show is off the hook in Charlotte. Last year, Ryan Switzer showed up, hung out with us for a little while, as did some other guys. So be sure you check us out there in Charlotte. And yes, as Gilbert says in the chat, when you're as old as we are, they're all kids. I mean, my sons are in high school; they're still kids. I mean, they're in college; they're still kids. So, no disrespect
hey, we got to get
intended.
to the MVP before we forget. Last
Yes,
week,
and Alan Minton's working on it because he says he's going to join us in Charlotte. But anyway, Don, MVP from last week.
Money Mark. Money Mark, is Money Mark in here? If you're in here, give us a hello or something. MVP from last week. There was a lot. We had a lot of really good discussion. Actually, the last couple of weeks have been really good with the discussion. People have really been getting into the top fives. Not so many complaints about that stuff. Do we have a top five for this week?
Are we going to do the top 5 female actors and actresses? I don't know
We
how we
can.
want to call it.
All right. So how
Do you
about
want to
this?
do that one?
And this actually email from my man Derek in the Tar
Your
Pit
new
Premium Message
best
Board.
friend.
If you
Shout out to
are
Derek.
a Tar Pit Premium Message Board person who's very, I don't know if active, or at least if you read the message board a lot, you know who Derek is. Even though Derek just started becoming active like about a month or so ago, he's made an impression on everybody. But anyway, so he sent me an email, wanted to let's see. He wants to know who are going to be the impact freshmen for 2023. So why don't we do? He wanted it to be a scoop, a weekly scoop. My Tuesday column. We have so many other plans for Weekly Scoop coming up. I love the Weekly Scoop idea, so please keep them coming. But we obviously kind of plan a lot of these things out in advance, and we probably wouldn't get to that before the season. But we did a top 5 freshman impact guys. We have about an hour. Who are the 5 you think are going to make an impact? Have to be true freshmen.
Do I have to go read your scoop now?
It's not in the
Let's see
scoop.
what oh, it's not. So that's what we're doing. We've switched up our top 5.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay, we can do that. Make me have to think. And you wonder why I'm never ready and I just wing it. Well, we're going to be winging it. Top 5. I agree with Justin in the chat. Top 5 newcomers makes it easier.
That's going to make it easier. But I mean, people care about I don't know. That changes it because, obviously, the most of your top 5 are going to be the transfer guys.
Yeah. Well,
I think we should do freshmen.
Okay,
I think it's
we'll
a little bit harder. You got to get a little bit more creative with it.
A true freshman, guys that
True
just got
freshmen.
there either in January, June, or July.
Yes, let's do true freshman top 5.
Okay, we'll do that. That'll be later in the show. We're also going to talk about a big announcement this coming weekend that Don and John and Tommy will be all over on Saturday afternoon. So if you want to stay out of the 100-degree heat, make sure you're tuned in to IC Live, Inside Carolina's YouTube channel for some live reporting.
Yeah, we're
gonna certain local high school. Tell us
I
about it.
don't think we want to give away too much because people don't realize just the variables that we have to juggle, and so much is out of our control. But we're gonna provide full coverage of Alex Taylor's announcement. He's probably among the guys who are remaining, he's the top guy, and really, he's probably the top guy for North Carolina's entire class. So this is significant, and so we are basically going to take what we've done the prior announcements, meaning Malcolm Ziegler and Jordan Ship. I think those are the only two recently that we did with as far as streaming it, that sort of thing. But we're going to take it a step further, and I really think a lot of people are going to enjoy what we're trying to do, and I emphasize the word trying. I know Tommy doesn't want to stress about it, and we're not stressing about it. We're not, but there are some things we're hoping that fall into place for us in order to do what we anticipate doing. But it should be fun. So definitely, the announcement is set for 4:00. But if it were me, I would definitely be tuning into Inside Carolina roughly 3:30, maybe a little bit earlier. Get yourself a snack, that sort of thing, and drink. Make sure we're staying cool, and so on Saturday.
Yeah, it'll be a fun day, and like you said, it could go sideways, and it often does. But we will, Packer 910 already shouting out the auto. Look, man, we've been working for 2 weeks trying to get the audio perfect.
The people don't realize. So we had a perfect mic for Ziegler, and then we have the freaking coach and the DB coach not even use a mic, and then Malcolm's using the mic for the sound system there. I mean, there's just the audio stuff is always going to be an obstacle because we can't mic everybody. We can't. There's just certain limitations that we have, but rest assured, we are trying everything. We're brainstorming. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to learn from prior situations to get this better. And I think everyone's going to be happy with what we do on Saturday.
Yeah, and look on the bright side. You could read it in the newspaper Sunday morning,
Or
or
actually,
maybe even
probably Monday morning.
Yeah, on Monday morning, like it used to do back in the day. But yes, Don, it will be 100+ degrees. It'll be 110 or 20 on the field. The computer might melt. The microphone might melt.
We
If it does,
have plans for that, and we might actually need to step up those plans. We might need to get some sort of fan or something. This is real. Like, I mean, I have had hotspots. I've had laptops just completely not die, but just shut down from overheating in certain situations. So this is a real thing. But I mean, we might have to step it a little bit, but we have some plans to kind of go at that.
yeah, it'll be a fun day. If anybody's wondering, I'll be in the comfort of my own home, right here, with an ice cold drink, couple ceiling fans. The one thing about the your man tower and my way up is what I call it, is this upstairs in the finished off attic.
Yeah.
And so it's hot anyway, air conditioned, working overtime. Perfect world, the man cave is in the basement as an actual cave. What else, Don? We've talked about recruiting a lot, and I think the announcements that are left for North Carolina fans to be um, up on. You mentioned Alex Taylor Saturday. Javaris Green was supposed to be a few days ago or a couple weeks ago. He's moved it back to his grandma's birthday, I believe it was. And then Paylor from Burlington Cummins is still out there. As far as North Carolina's board, as we know it now, it's pretty close to that, correct?
I think for the time being, yeah. I mean, those are the three. We talk about in the weekly scoop, not going to give anything away, but in the weekly scoop, we talked about a position North Carolina is going to keep its eye on during the season, but we don't have any targets and really a lot of people have thrown some names at me the last couple of weeks of potential targets and really I think it's nothing's ever 100%, but I think there's it's really good chance it's going to be somebody that we have no idea who it is right now. But besides that, the focus is Alex Hare this weekend, Jonathan Paylor next week, and we can talk about that a little bit. Kind of feel like there's definitely some smoke there, but might be more just to kind of create some suspense. And then, of course, we have Javaris Green, which will be in the middle of August. He's deciding between North Carolina and Michigan State.
Yeah, all three wide receivers. And we're well aware of how North Carolina produces wide receivers. So all three targets. Alex Taylor, of course, being the highest on the board, the highest in the nation. At any rate, what you need to be watching out for, you stay in touch with Don on InsideCarolina.com. Look, great scoop, man. You know what? I have a fun fact from your walk-ons. I want to talk about your new offer list and all that, but there's a fun fact about one of the preferred walk-ons that I bet you do not know.
Okay.
Who holds the record, and he's tied for the record, for longest interception return in North Carolina football history?
You talk about high school football or
Nope.
UNC?
College, North Carolina Tar Heels.
Is it
Longest interception return, who holds or is tied with the record?
Reggie Love?
It is Reggie Love. How did you know that?
I'm an encyclopedia.
Yeah, he's the only one who's played for Carolina against Tulane, and I remember that game because I did a double. Right, we went to Tulane, Carolina. I think was at noon on whatever day it was. May have been 1:00 back in the day when they used to have 1:00 football games. Did that. Watched Carolina. Watched Reggie Love 100-yard interception return, and then rode over to Winston-Salem and watched Florida State beat Wake Forest that night. And so that was a fun day. 1994.
Oof.
Dude, ooh, yeah. What's that? 29 years ago? Jesus.
I think I
Somebody
was 2.
said, at least you were born. I know people that weren't born at that point that I'm good friends with, and that's kind of sad. Anyway, what else recruiting wise? You've got a ton of new summer offers out. You mentioned Trey Blue out of Cary as a 25.
Yeah, well, that was more of like kind of housekeeping sort of stuff. We didn't do a whole lot of weekly scoops during the summer, and typically in a weekly scoop, we mention the prior week's offers, and we didn't do that with how we did the weekly scoop during the summer. So I wanted to kind of throw all that out there, get everybody back on the same page. We're slowly kind of shift to that 2025 class. Yeah, and I think some of the weekly scoops are going to shift even more to that 2025 class in the coming weeks. But yeah, so that's all that was. But yeah,
right.
Plenty of stuff in there. The walk-on stuff everybody always enjoys. It's always fun to look back on later on, also in a few years.
Let me ask you this question, and I get this question all the time since now they know I work with D. Don Callahan. Quiet period versus dead period. Right now we're in a quiet period. Explain the difference for folks.
Okay, so quiet period means that you can make visits. The dead period means that colleges can't host visits. That's basically, so quiet period, kids can visit schools. So that's why you will see North Carolina has a recruiting, like a cookout recruiting event on Saturday. They'll have some guys on campus. That's in the scoop. It also mentions a few names of potential, or not even potential, guys who are expected to visit on Saturday. A lot of 2024 commits, but also there is one commit North Carolina is still pursuing, but there's a handful of 2025s that are expected to be there also. South Carolina is having an event on Friday, as is NC State's having their Alpha Wolf showcase thing on Friday. So this is kind of, because basically we've been in a dead period since, I guess, the end of June. And this dead period goes all the way until September 1st. But the NCAA gives schools just that basically a week to kind of get some visits in prior to the season. And that's what this is.
Yeah, and then of course, high school kids will start their seasons. They get fired up. That's why they like to get the announcements out of the way before the season starts, so they can focus on, 24 guys it's senior year, 25s it says junior year, and 26s is their sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
If you need things to make you feel old, 2026 guys on Don's recruiting updates are rising sophomores in high school.
Yeah.
What's left, Don? Let me ask, and back up to the preferred walk-on deal that you do, and I think that's fascinating, and it's worth, if you don't read anything else in the scoop, read about these guys that are coming in and walking on for Carolina. There's some names in there. Just sort of tell us how you put that together and the process of getting those lined up. Obviously, you're well connected. One of the big names that folks will recognize immediately, I think, is Cade Law, Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
Whose brother Cruz is in a recruiting class coming up. Just sort of detail a little bit for us the preferred walk-on process for North Carolina And if you want to, a couple of these names, we mentioned Reggie Love the second already.
So, I mean, I keep a running tally of guys who say that they've committed to a preferred walk-on opportunity in North Carolina. But as I've seen through the years, I've been doing this for forever, that there are a lot of guys who commit, and then maybe there's an offer that comes in from, the school, and they end up taking that. So that running list is always not the most reliable. So I do cross-check it with some very, very, very reliable sources who give me exactly who's going to be enrolling at North Carolina. And then it's just kind of scouring the internet. Google is my friend. And so is Huddle, and finding this information. I'll reach out to some of the kids and try to, get a little bit more background. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. And it's so much easier nowadays because everything's on there. I can remember a time where Michelle would help me, and we would have to search and try to find stuff, and it was difficult. Now everything's on the internet. There's photos of all these kids. It's crazy.
So, preferred walk-on versus regular walk-on versus committed recruit or recruited prospect. Nutshell.
So there are a bunch of like little finite rules sort of things that I won't get into, mostly because I don't know all of them. But
at least you're honest.
Yeah. So obviously, a guy who gets a scholarship offer, has his schooling paid for, that sort of thing. With preferred, so a scholarship guy, as everyone knows, their requirements for a school like North Carolina, really any school, from an academic standpoint, are lessened than the requirements for your average student. Okay. Preferred walk-ons also get those academic reliefs, I guess we'll call them, to enroll. And so there are situations where if a kid like there have been situations where I've been told, yeah, and they only and UNC only gets a certain amount of them, the admissions department, and that number, from my understanding, changes every year. I don't know exactly how they come up with it. I'm sure there's some sort of numbers that they're trying to balance there at the admissions department, but there's a certain amount they get every year. So UNC actually has to kind of juggle, okay, this kid could probably get in, so we're just going to bring him in as a walk-on. But this kid, it's going to be tougher for him to get through admission, so we'll bring him in as a preferred walk-on. So I know that sort of kind of happens also. But really the other thing, too, with preferred walk-ons is that, at least initially, they're guaranteed a roster spot. What is it that they start camp at a certain number, was at 105, and then eventually can get up to 120. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's accurate.
So they're guaranteed. They're guaranteed that, and so that's what kind of helps with the preferred walk-on guys.
It's interesting, you would think with 85 scholarships you don't need walk-ons, but you do, because they certainly help with practice. They certainly help with depth in opportunities. I mentioned Cade Law. I mean, comes from Vanderbilt, so he's not a high school.
We probably need to talk about him a little bit in depth, because
let's go ahead then. 6'1", 225, played baseball at Vanderbilt. Pretty solid program at Vanderbilt. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that the preferred walk-on group is always kind of a little bit of a mixed bag. A lot of them, though, if you go and look, typically their best offers are like Division II, Division III, and that's what they're deciding over, because most of the time, those schools are not offering full scholarships. So it is beneficial for them to be able to get into a school like North Carolina, as opposed to taking some money. I mean, everyone's financial situation with their families is different, but anyway. But there are always a ton of exceptions. Your specialist is a big exception, because a lot of schools do not like to scholarship specialists. Now, North Carolina has shown a willingness to scholarship specialists, but they also like to kind of fill that depth chart up with preferred walk-ons and give opportunities to earn scholarships. Those tend to end up being the players who eventually get put on scholarship, or those specialists. Cade, though, is this rare, I wouldn't say rare, is kind of the exception to the typical walk-on, where he's a kid who was seriously recruited as a quarterback coming out of high school. Now, it wasn't major. I think it was, I want to get this right. No, Akron was one of them. I think Army and Navy were the other three major ones. But he had a bunch of other scholarship offers from lower schools. So this was a legit recruit, you know. On top of that, the fact, I mean, I don't follow college baseball too much, but I know that Vanderbilt baseball program is one of the better ones. So the fact that he was brought in on scholarship there is pretty significant. And he was only there for a year. So I think that this is a kid who is just a raw athlete, played quarterback, played catcher. You know, catcher is a very athletic position in baseball. And even though, you know, typically in movies it's the fat kid, but it actually is a very athletic
At
position.
the higher levels of baseball, catcher is usually a stud.
Yeah. But so he's definitely has the athleticism, and really, you know, one of the things Tommy Thigpen can kind of, you know, add to his resume is just you look at the guys who came to North Carolina or wherever else, and were not these finished products at linebacker or you know, I mean, Ced Gray was mostly a wide receiver in high school. You know, Bruce Carter was a quarterback. Quan Sturdivant was a quarterback. You know, and so you bring in this kid. I mean, this could end up being a bit of a surprise for North Carolina, and you don't have to worry about him, you know, potentially not giving football his all or whatever, because he's looking forward to playing with his brother next year. So, I mean, definitely a kid who's going to be all in on all that sort of stuff. So I think definitely that's the one I would definitely watch for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting, and like I said, if you haven't read The Scoop, check it out. They there's a lot of good information in there, and it breaks down sort of the portal
So
guys,
Luke
or
says
not the portal
catchers
guys.
generally aren't fast. I agree. Although JT Realmuto is the quarterback is the catcher of my team, but this was a kid. If you look at it, he was recruited for a lot of option style offenses, Navy and Army. Clearly, they wanted a kid. They don't want a statue pocket passer. They're recruiting, you know, mobile quarterback. So he definitely has the mobility and that sort of thing.
Who's the latest quarterback turned linebacker who played at North Carolina?
The latest.
Well, and you know, I don't
I mean,
know
how
if
far back?
Power
I
or
mean,
a couple years. You can name 2-3 years if you really want to. Come on, Don.
I feel like the bottom there.
Chaz Surratt.
Oh, Chaz Surratt. Yeah, forgot about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a beneficial mood for
Yeah.
Chaz Surratt. How good a quarterback was he in high school? Or was he a system quarterback in high school?
He was a very good quarterback, but he put up huge numbers. He was just a tremendous athlete. I mean, they played 2A. He played with his brother. It was a lot of like playing in the backyard sort of thing. The other thing too, and Coach Bias was awesome to me with dealing with, always welcomed me to come over there. But I remember being at a game against Bandies where they were blowing the doors off Bandies in the fourth quarter. And I was taking photos. I was on Bandy's sideline, and their team and their coaching staff was pissed that Chaz was still in the game. My guess is that happened a lot. So Chaz definitely kind of padded his stats in some games where the outcome was clearly decided long before. But he was a very, very, very good high school. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. Very, very, very good high school quarterback for sure. And led his and the coolest thing too, I don't know if you remember this, but he hurt his throwing arm, and he was like, it was something crazy, like 7 yards short of some passing record. And so he went into a game and threw with his other arm. Yeah. And the crazy part about the first throw was caught, but it was a screen on purpose, thinking that was the safest. And the guy was tackled behind the line of scrimmage, so they had to keep on doing it. But he eventually broke the record with his other arm. And because he broke that arm, that's why he enrolled at North Carolina early, because initially he wanted to stay and play basketball with his brother and win another state championship there. But with the arm situation, obviously made more sense for him to roll at North Carolina early.
Better player, him or his brother in high school?
In high school, you got to go with Chaz.
And then in college, who would you say? Even with the switch to linebacker.
Yeah, I think you still have to go with Chaz. Although Sage was really good at Wake Forest.
He was.
He was perfect for what they wanted to do. Just kind of throw that ball down the field and and get it. What's that phrase? Mark Packer uses, the frisbee catching dogs. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's what he kind of fit into perfectly.
Just go and get it. So, like I mentioned, Don's, the extra scoops are there. We're not going to talk about those much. It mentions Taylor, Paler, and Green. We've already talked about them briefly. Don, as far as the 25s, and not so much 26 classes, but as far as the 25s, how big is this for those guys? How big is this coming season for the 25 guys? I mean, is it the most imperative thing for a 25 guy to have a big junior year?
I wouldn't go that far, but it is absolutely huge. This season for the 25s is what's determining what type of recruit you are. Even if you already have offers, if you come out and don't look good, then you'll stop hearing from those coaches that have offered you. But there are kids who, when I was at Trey Blues practice talking to his coach, and Trey has 5 offers, one North Carolina, one's Maryland, and he said, I have a bunch of schools that can't wait to get his first 3 games. He has a special situation. I won't go too deep into it because we'll just get off track here. But so there's a lot of, expect to see a lot of offers throughout the season, and then even more after the season. So this season definitely kind of dictates just what type of recruit you are on most, particularly the Power 5 level. Obviously, it's different for different levels, but Power 5, this is huge.
Yeah, I didn't realize it's already 32 minutes past the hour, so I need to do Johnny T-shirt and JohnnyT-shirt.com. National guys will pay the bills in a minute, but we need to be supporting Johnny T-shirt. They're local. They're on Franklin Street. And as we know, it is important to support local businesses. I know you guys heard about the Med Deli fire. That's another local business that needs support from the locals. All of those folks on Franklin Street that are still there, that have been a part of Franklin Street for years, need to support them locally. If you can't get there to do it, with game days coming up soon enough, then order it online at JohnnyT-shirt.com. They'll take care of you online. You get your 10% online or in person, or however you want to do it, and it's worth it with college football season coming up. And of course, basketball and baseball and all the other uniforms you can get from Johnny T-shirt and all the swag. They've got it all. I like cooler stickers. I go in Johnny T-shirt, get them loaded up. Check out them. They support us. They support you, and they support Carolina, and the alumni is the place to shop. National guys pay the bills. We'll be right back. Noon dish. That's Don Callahan and 90 plus of his favorite friends. All right, guys. 12:34.
Hey, we have a superstar here in the chat.
I know. Look, and I was just about to reference that. Hey, y'all, look over in the chat. Taylor Viplis is in there.
I need to get his autograph.
And I got to get Taylor and Joey their flowers because I've listened to the Elijah Green Players Lounge already, and I'll freely admit I've done my fair share of these, including Drake May and Willie Lampkin and all them. Elijah Green might be the best one. If you haven't checked out that Players Lounge, check it out. What a great young man, a great representative of North Carolina, and a guy that could have left Chapel Hill and nobody would have blamed him. And now he sits as the running back of note last year and has a chance to do it again this year. And just like I said, great student, a great young man, a great steward of the game and steward of North Carolina. And Vip and Joey knocked it out the park. Hour long, worth every second. Don, do you listen to our players' lounges?
No.
Don Callahan, do you read anything else on Inside Carolina but your recruiting stuff?
I do not. But I do have the one that you referenced, your interview with, you told me the other day about, with Mark May. I'm definitely going to listen to that.
You need to check it out. And
yeah,
I mean, there's just a ton of great content, and the recruiting stuff is awesome on both sides. But when you have opportunity, one of my favorite parts, and it is a video that pops up on the VOD stuff, is Elijah Green talking about. I've always said college players are just regular students with an extra talent, and they're really good at it. He talks about that being regular person with the troubles and the issues and the the sadness and the happiness and all the stuff that regular people feel. And it is a great insight into the life of
I'll
a
have to
student
listen to that,
athlete.
Ben.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, you need to be supporting. We support Johnny T-shirt. You need to support the rest of Inside Carolina.
I
I
support
really
Johnny
need to.
T-shirt. If I'm
What?
gonna go buy something UNC related or whatever, my daughter a couple Christmases ago said she wanted a bunch of college shirts, so I bought her a bunch of UNC shirts.
Nice. They do not. They do not sell Philadelphia, Philly,
They
or
do not.
Flyer stuff at Johnny
They do
T-shirt.
not.
Thank goodness.
Hey, that orange would look pretty good in there.
Yeah, no, it would not. It would get thrown out at the start of it. I don't understand. No, we're not going there because I know how you get heated. I do think Schwarber needs to lead off.
No,
just joking
no,
with you, my man. I
dude,
know
I
what
am so
triggers you.
Look, I know we're not supposed to talk about this, but so Thompson changes the lineup,
Here we go,
but
folks.
keeps Schwarber 1 and Trey Turner 2. I don't know, like I mean, these guys must have like nude photos of him that they're threatening to throw out there because I just don't get it. I mean,
Well, Trey Turner's a great player, but he
he
looks like he
is.
hadn't played baseball lately. The way
He
he's making arrows
Yeah,
at the
he's just
reviews.
he looks completely lost at the plate. He's swinging at garbage. He's always up 0-2. Even in the field, he looks like crap, which is fine. Here's the crazy thing, is that he is so talented that even him just looking like absolute crap, he's still like a really good player. I'm not saying to bench these guys. I don't even have anything against Schwarber. Just move him back in the lineup. He shouldn't be leading off. Schwarber's batting like 180. Why is he
Listen,
leading off?
can I give everybody some heads up? If you meet Don, if you walk up on Don, he's usually got a big goofy camera. He looks like a tourist, and he's wearing that 24/7 shirt all the time. Do not mention Philadelphia Phillies. Do not, do not, do not. Or you will be sitting there for maybe hours on end, might get a little spittle on you as he gets fired up talking about the Phillies.
I'm just mad about this specific right now. It just pisses me off. I am very logical. I can agree to disagree. I just don't understand the logic behind these moves, and I think it's because we have a crappy manager, and crappy is the G-rated version of what I would love to say about him.
Can we move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Anything left? We've talked about the Alex Taylor announcement. Folks need to be on the YouTube channel about 3:30. We'll be knocking it out of the park on that day if it doesn't melt. The weekly scoops out there, couple new stories you've got up, just a ton of recruiting stuff. When the season kicks off,
Mm-hmm.
and this is relevant to people watching this and paying attention to recruiting, when the college football and the high school football seasons kick off, what's your workload do? Just out of curiosity.
It really simplifies a little bit just because it's so organized. You know what I mean? Like the main thing is when recruits are visiting for games and keeping track of just every weekend where recruits are going. And then obviously guys who visit North Carolina on a particular weekend, I want to catch up with them, seeing what they're thinking, that sort of thing. And it's it really flips to the 2025 class. I mean, that's going to, for the most part, be the focus. But yeah, and it's the way the way the schedule usually works out. I mean, we'll have like back-to-back games, which drives me nuts, and then I'll have like 3 weekends of no UNC games, and then I'll have another. I think isn't there like 3 home games in a row in the middle of the season?
I can't stand that. But
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, and it's not good for North Carolina too, because it does make it harder to kind of like if the home games are spread out a little bit, you could probably get kids to come back to a couple games. But if a kid visits, like in the middle of the season, a kid visits, let's say 4, 5, and 6 are all home games. They visit 4, they're not coming back for 5 and 6, most of them.
Yeah.
So it makes it a little bit harder. So I mean, usually you can get a kid come to the opener and then maybe come to another game. So and then for me, but that's my focus. And then I'll go to. I used to go to a lot of high school games, and the problem with that is that the outcome of that game dictates a lot. I mean, I remember Alaric Mullins, I go to his game and they lost an absolute heartbreaker. And I was like, hey, if you don't mind doing this interview. And he's like, yeah. And he literally has tears down in his eyes. I'm asking these questions. I feel terrible. Or Ryan Houston, when they almost upset Independence. I'm going way back. When Butler almost beat Independence for the first time. And the coach is like, we're not doing any interviews, And so, I go all the way to Charlotte for nothing, basically. So, and then, and I mentioned earlier, everything's online. I have access, obviously, to Huddle and some other things that I can look to. And so I do a lot of more practices than I do actual games. And I feel like I get a lot more. It's a lot more laid back. You get more time with the coaches, with the kid, sometimes the parents, that sort of thing. That's just how I kind of do things. So that makes it easier for me when I have to go to a UNC game on a Saturday.
So let me recruits visit. This I'm gonna go inside baseball since you got on a rant about baseball. But inside baseball, how does covering recruits at games, at college games, and you don't have to pick a specific player, but just in general, do all these recruiting services, not just Don Callahan, does everybody call every recruit and say, "Hey, how was your visit to such and such?" Or I mean, how do you decide how to cover that kind of stuff, especially during in season? You mentioned it's more structured, but you still got to get up with folks.
Yeah.
Do
So
interviews.
usually so let's say we have a game this Saturday, and I identify, I mean, I'm not usually, I mean, how these things are. They'll have like 40, 50 kids, every weekend, but only like a handful of them have UNC offers or legitimate UNC targets. And so those will be my targets. Usually I have some sort of relationship with them. I could shoot them a text and we can kind of set up an interview time and all that sort of stuff. And so, and I'm also trying to make sure that we have content and it's kind of spread out, that sort of thing. I think a lot of sites do it that way. Some sites don't do the interviews. I mean, everyone does something different. I wish, obviously I do things my way because I've been doing it a long time and I feel like it works really well. And I wish people would do it that way. It also drives me nuts. Like some sites, they'll do an interview with a kid and all they ask them about is like, okay, what do you think of the game? What do you think of the facilities? What do you think of the coaching staff? And that's it. I feel like you don't learn anything from that. I'm definitely trying to approach my interviews, trying to learn something. And I think it's important to find out, where else have you been? Where else do you intend on going? I mean, a lot of kids, if you say who are your favorites and they don't have a favorites list out yet, they're not going to tell you that. But obviously that's what we would love to know. And so trying to get to that as much as possible, I think is pretty key. And I wish more reporters would kind of do that instead of focusing on what the kid thinks about the indoor practice facility.
Right.
I
agree with that. A couple people have chimed in with their top 5 impact freshmen, and that's first year true freshman at North Carolina. So if you haven't put it in there, I'm trying to star everybody's comments. Somebody in the chat asked, KM Shires asked, got a lot of questions.
Yeah, let's bring up some questions because we're running out of time already.
Yeah. Will North Carolina have recruits in Charlotte? How do neutral site games work for recruiting?
So barring I haven't double checked and they changed this rule a bunch, but both North Carolina and South Carolina can give recruits tickets. But since it's off campus, there can't be any interaction between the recruit and either of the coaching staffs, regardless of who they are there as guests of, quote unquote.
Gotcha.
So, we've never, because of that, we've never done a whole lot, just because it's a little bit harder to kind of cover. I mean, we'll report like guys that we know were there, sort of thing, but it's a little bit harder of a situation. But yes, there will be recruits there. Gus Ritchie told me that that's his intentions on being in Charlotte as North Carolina's guest, which makes sense because South Carolina really isn't, a contender in his recruitment. So he's one that has mentioned that to me already, and there'll be others. And then South Carolina will have guys there too. And then there'll be a lot of guys who are there for both schools.
Well, Alan Minton says, can Carolina pull a top 25 class for 2025? I mean, I guess a lot depends on this season, right?
Well, yeah, it depends on this season. Can they? Yes. Will they? I think, and I guess I'm still in the middle of like a back and forth with the NIL stuff in the one thread, but I think people are still trying to understand the NIL stuff. And I think, and Tommy, you've recently gotten educated on this also. I mean, with
NIL's changed the game, and this
yeah,
is the thing, and I'll say
it's
this,
good.
and I'm not going to get on the soapbox about it.
Yeah,
But the one thing about NIL that is done for fans, if you want a player, if you want them to, and I'm not talking about just North Carolina, I'm talking about any school, there are opportunities for you to give money to help the school of your choice secure the players of your choice. Now, you can't pay them directly, which clearly that's going on around the country. But if you want to support like Heels for Life or whatever collective at whatever school you want to do, there's opportunities to do that. And that's the one thing that since I've been doing this stuff with you, Don, people think, can ask me recruiting questions, and I'm all about it. I enjoy it, but I don't know anything that, I learn it from you, and I've learned the process. But if you want to go to the Eric Church concert in Memorial Hall, that's for NIL. That's for North Carolina's NIL thing. And I'm not advertising it at all, but that's an opportunity for you to go and put money into the collective that handles NIL, which has an effect on recruiting, whether we like it or whether the people like it or not. The bottom line is it provides opportunities for kids to make money, but it provides opportunities for fans, boosters, whoever to get in the game, so to speak. And so I'm not a huge fan of the way they've set it up. I'm not a huge fan of that mixed with the transfer portal and all that. I think it's created, like we've said over and over, the Wild West type phenomenon. But the bottom line is recruiting is going to be, look at who leads recruiting every year. And that ain't going to change unless the money changes, unless the money changes the power structure in recruiting in college football. It's just kind of is what it is. But there's opportunities there to, put your money where your mouth is, for the lack of a better way of doing it.
And how it relates to who was it that asked the question? Because you took it down on me. Was it Alan?
Yes.
Alan. As it pertains
class.
to Alan's question, so the way it's looking is that we have about, 12 to 15 schools that are taking NIL to the extreme, a lot of them to the illegal extreme. And I really think that some of them are kind of following the same rules that North Carolina is. They just have a lot more money to kind of, say that you could potentially get. Regardless, I think that those 12 to 15 schools who are taking it to the next level with the NIL, I mean, they should be making up most of the top 20 in each class. And if that's the case for a school like North Carolina, who hasn't, taken it to the stream, and I'm talking about from the standpoint of what their collective can offer. And I'm trying to be very careful because a lot of this stuff is like, we get from a lot of people who understand this stuff way better. There's not a lot of hard evidence on this. So we're relying on people who I've been relying on for years to kind of give me this information. And I don't have all the answers for it. But with that said, basically, if we're going to say, let's say the top 15 are basically these NIL pro schools, we'll call them, that leaves North Carolina 10 spots to kind of get in there and hope that they are doing a good job of getting those tier below the NIL kids, meaning the kids who are getting a huge amount of NIL money. Because I don't think every kid is getting money. I don't think that. I really don't. I know some people believe that all Power 5 kids are getting. I just don't. And their kids are getting money, but I don't think all of them. And so North Carolina kind of has to maximize that, and then they can kind of squeeze in there. And obviously, I think while we won't be on the level of the 2021 class, I think the in-state group will be better in the 2025 class, which will help North Carolina. Will it help them enough to obtain a 2025 class? That remains to be seen. As you mentioned, the season is going to play a big role in that. What happens during the season. And I think a big part of it, we talk about all the time, perception, prestige. That's what matters to these kids. And, so not just putting up a lot of wins, but putting up wins where kids are watching, putting up wins where, North Carolina is playing on national television. I think I mentioned to you the other day, last season, North Carolina, now I probably should, I didn't prepare this, so I don't have it up in front of me. But last season, I think North Carolina played 4 games on either Fox, ABC, ESPN, or NBC. And UNC lost all 4 of those games. So those are the games that most of the kids are watching, if they're watching them. The games that North Carolina was winning and beating the crap out of Pitt and all that was on ESPNU, and the ACC network. So North Carolina this season not only has to get a lot of wins, but has to beat some of these teams when they're on the national stage also. And I think that will help. And then win these games. We mentioned last week, we were going through our top 5 games for recruits. I imagine Miami, as we talked about, that I think was number 1 for everybody when it comes to the best games to have recruits at. When you have those recruits there, beat Miami and have a great atmosphere, which the fans can obviously help with,
Yep.
And so, beat NC State, because I tell you, talk about Paler. Do you know who has attended the last 3 UNC NC State games? Jonathan Paler. And there's a lot of other recruits. Alex Taylor could be. I haven't checked, but Paler definitely is. There's a lot of other recruits who have done the same. So it doesn't look good that, when Jonathan Paler's in the stands and you lose to NC State, is it 2 years in a row now?
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of variables, but we've covered
this game in Charlotte is huge.
Yeah.
Because this game's going to be on national television and game day is going to be there. So people are going to be talking. This is great publicity for UNC. People are going to be talking about it a bunch. They're going to be talking about it in game day a lot. If North Carolina, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if North Carolina comes out and just completely shits the bed, that's going to hurt recruiting. And it might not be something you can overcome later on in the season. Now, if they come in, it's a great game. And even if it's a great game and UNC loses, that's not, that's good, but they have to come out and play well.
Yeah, 100%. You can't pay, you cannot put a value on the press that they're going to get over the next month with game day being there and with game day there on that day. And then the game itself, prime time on ABC. I mean, it's, great opportunities for Carolina to show what it's all about, for Matt Brown and his staff to show what it's all about. And another thing, and the last thing I'm going to make, because we're going to get to the top 5 list before we get out of here, is that now there is even a more there's always been a player development has always been a big deal in college football. Now it's going to be even more the way the recruiting is. So you have to, North Carolina's had a lot more draft picks than they get credit for, than people think about, and a lot more than some in the area. There's a team down in there in West Raleigh that talks about developing players. Well, go look at the draft numbers. They certainly bear out a difference there. But the bottom line is coaches have to develop players and to get them forward. You don't need a top 5 guy coming in or 5-star coming in and then getting drafted in the 7th round. You need a 3-star guy coming in that gets drafted on the first day or the second day. Those type development things matter, I think. Not only matter for recruiting, but matter how good your program is going to be. So a lot of variables. But in NIL, you got an opportunity to get in the game, and individual folks can get in the game, and that's the plan there. Don, anything left before we go top 5? We got a lot of good comments. On this list.
Yeah, I think we're good. We can probably go on and on and on about about North Carolina's potential for the 2025 class. I think it's kind of starts now, though. I guess is what I'm basically kind of sort of saying.
Yeah. Shout out to the 100+. We broke the 100 glass ceiling right here for our show. So shout out to the folks here. If you have not submitted your top 5 true freshmen of impact for the 2023 class, let's get it. I'm going to go number 1. I say it every week. I don't like you taking my name. That's my gamer tag. Carolina 93. Campbell, Amari Campbell, Michael Short, Jabron Harvey, Starlings, Culliver. Offense is too stacked for too many impact freshmen this year, but defense could see some impact. And then on special teams.
That's a good point. You really have to weigh the opportunity. I think matters probably more than the talent. Opportunity and college readiness more than talent at this stage. Josh Downs clearly was ready, but he was behind Daz Newsome and those other wide receivers during his freshman year, so he didn't play until the bowl game, really.
So they opted out. Yep.
Yeah.
To the
So
Orange Bowl. Justin says, assume most of the freshmen will have biggest impact on special teams, and look, special teams is a big portion of it. I agree there. Campbell, Christian Hamilton, Tyler Thompson, Michael Short, Chris Culliver. So a decent mix of offense and defense there. Slee Rat, freshman, mostly in practice, making other better. So take that. You got Culliver, Thompson, Harvey, McConnell, and Cost. Saw Caleb Cost tweet or IG or whatever it was, Lovey Eyes at the baseball stadium the other day. Thought that was interesting. He is certainly a two-sport guy. Preston, Cade Law, who we talked about, Michael Short, Jordan
ooh,
Louis.
that's actually a good idea. Oh, wait,
Cade Law.
he's not a true freshman.
Yeah,
He's a
valid.
redshirt freshman.
Yeah, valid. Michael Short, he's a newcomer, though. We'll give it to him. Michael Short, Jordan Louis, Amari Campbell, Chris Culliver, special teams. Luke, last name unknown, Amari Campbell, Michael Short, J. Brian Harvey, Aiden Duncanson, Tyler Thompson. Alan Minton's question already hit. Slagle, Cost, Lavalley, Campbell, Duncanson, and Culliver. There's a question from Luke in there. I should have put that up there. Might have to
What's
do
the
that
question?
one.
Maybe we can get it real quick.
Let me do this first.
Okay.
SoCal coach, Duncanson, Hamilton, Caleb Cost, Harvey, and Chris Culliver. Before we get into our top five, there's a great list, folks, and there's a couple more that have come in. Luke's question, Don, do teams avoid inviting common targets to neutral site games considering they could end up as a negative?
No, not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of that. I don't believe that to be the case. I think you want to be able to offer the tickets to get them there. It's going to be a great atmosphere regardless because you have the two different fan bases there. So yeah, I think you just try to get them on there.
Was it a State Carolina game where they might have been recruits there for State or something and showed up at the Carolina locker room or vice versa? It seemed like that happened one time. Anyway, over in Raleigh. Colby Jones, Duncanson, Hamilton, Campbell, Culliver, Harvey, and Alan Minton just copied Slagle's. You get -10 for copying somebody, even if you say the name.
Alan will not be the MVP.
Really? Send your trophy back from 2 weeks ago. I think for me, and a lot of people have mentioned Short and Amari Campbell. They love Amari Campbell, and I think he'll get some opportunity.
He's my number one.
But how many snaps will he get on defense? Special teams is a different animal. I think, yes, that there. But we've heard over and over that the backups have to play, and they have to play. Will they play is another thing. I think Gray and Eccles are rarely off the field. I mean, Cedric Glary has played as many snaps as anybody in college in 5 years. I mean, the bottom line is opportunity, like you mentioned, but Amari Campbell can play, and he will get that opportunity. I think for me, purely on guys that can make a splash that you'll notice. I feel like a lot of times folks don't notice it on special teams, even though it's very important. The everyday fan is not noticing that somebody made a great play or somebody made a play on special teams unless it's a great play, a big hit, recovering a fumble, returning a kick even, things like that. But I think you got Hamilton and Culliver on the receiver side of it. I think they can have an opportunity. They might be the two for me, the impact guys for me that will say those dudes made an impact that we noticed, that we saw, that was other than just in the Keenan Football Center. The coaches noticing an impact that the fan, the normal everyday watcher saw Christian Hamilton make a great play or Chris Culliver make a great play and get a long pass from Drake or something like that. I think those two, I think Campbell, I think Tyler Thompson could, I think J. Brown Harvey could. Those guys, if they're all healthy, then certainly. I just don't know about at the linebacker position because for those guys to make an impact at linebacker position, that means something maybe have happened to Eccles and Gray, and I don't think that can happen for this North Carolina team to be
Yeah,
successful.
I think the fact is, and I purposely chart this every year, what true freshmen play, how much, and that sort of thing. And it is far less than what you expect. And I can remember Andre Green's dad, who I absolutely love. Every time I see him, we have a long conversation. He was awesome to deal with during the recruiting process, but he definitely was adamant about, hey, you keep on saying that Dre's not going to play as a true freshman. I'm telling you, he's going to play. I said, look, it doesn't back this up. And that ended up coming to fruition. I mean, he played a bunch in the bowl game, but that was because of the opportunities end up being there. But that was after the full season. Mary Rice, Zach Rice's mom, very mad at me because I came on here after Zach committed to North Carolina. And after Steve Wilfong said Zach Rice was going to play as a true freshman and could potentially start and yada, yada, Steve is awesome. Steve is probably the best at what he does. And I said, look, that's not going to happen because offensive linemen play far less than other positions. And that came to fruition. So the stats just don't back this stuff up as far as freshmen coming in and playing. Are there exceptions? Yes. You got to remember, we hear about the exceptions because they're exceptions, because it's a novelty. That's why we hear about it all the time. But the reality is that a lot of these freshmen will not end up making plays or being impact players other than on special teams. My top 5, Campbell, I'm with you and most of the other people. Number 2, no one else mentioned. And it goes against the rule I said, but I'm going to throw it out there just because of a lot of the feedback I've received from a lot of different sources. RJ Grigsby. A lot of talk about just how good of a player he is. You mentioned how UNC wants to get the backups playing. I think if they're going to get backup offensive linemen on the field, and that's what they're going to do, which, at this point, yes, let's wait until they actually do it before we believe it. But if they do, Grigsby, I think, is going to be a guy who's going to be in that second team, who's going to get on the field. This staff absolutely loves him. He played at a big program in the Atlanta area. He came as an early enrollee. The thing with him is that the knock on him was not his talent. He certainly has a talent. If you were to see him in person, he's not very tall. Let's just put it that way. And I think a lot of
6'3", 310.
All right. Well, that might be
aspirational.
Yeah. But he is he's a dog. And so I think a guy like that, if he's already grabbing the coaching staff's attention, so I put him number 2. Number 3, Culliver. Everyone knows he was probably my favorite recruit of last year. And he was the guy I was banging on the table with the 24/7 guys about how he needs to be ranked higher. And finally that was achieved later on in the season, but it took a lot. And then, I got Caleb Cost, just because he's a great athlete, plays a star position. I initially had Trey Miller back in December for my most likely to make a big impact, with the signees, just because the opportunity that was there at the defensive back position. Since then, UNC has added a bunch of transfers at DB, which has kind of made it a little bit more difficult. But I think Cost could definitely get in there at the star position because they like him a lot at star. And then it was tough for me, my number 5. I went short, but you can go Kayla Lavallee also, but the way I broke the tie was short, enrolled early. Lavallee didn't get there until June, but it wouldn't surprise me if they put in backups that either one of those guys gets on the field, but they definitely should be contributing on special teams.
Yeah, and Short, if my memory serves, came in December, got the bowl practices.
Yes.
Got the spring practices.
Was it Short and Campbell?
Yeah.
It was 2 of them, but Short is definitely one of them. I think it was Campbell.
Yeah, so that's even extra than enrolling early. So maybe I'll just believe that one of those guys has an impact as a linebacker. When I see it.
I think really, if we are betting on this, it would be a terrible bet to bet on any of these guys. Nothing against them. It's just true freshmen just don't make impacts.
Yep.
Statistically speaking, the numbers through the years backs it up. Doesn't mean that they won't. Doesn't mean that the exception could not occur, because it certainly could. But statistically speaking, a lot of these guys are not going to make an impact outside of special teams.
Yep. Don, I don't have anything left, man.
Well,
I could talk to you forever. It's
we're 5 minutes over, so
Yeah. Shout out to everybody that joined. A lot of new faces in here. Shout out to folks that submitted your top 5 list. Folks seem to like top 5 Carolina related, so we will figure out some more. We've got a ton of content coming up. If you're a fan of the podcast and the YouTubes and all, even if Don's not on them, then we've got the Over Under podcast coming. We've got the season prediction podcast coming. Vip will be out there doing his stuff. We had the Players Lounge that's up today with Elijah Green. Hope to have one more player next week. We'll see if we can work that out. It'd be a good one as well. Ton of content on both sides. The basketball board is kicking practice. The players have been living it up in the Outer Banks, the North Carolina Outer Banks, not the ones on the TV show that were filmed elsewhere. But they've been having fun. So a lot of content on the basketball side. Hubert Davis had a press availability last week, so just Inside Carolina's all over it, wrapped up all over it. I always say there's no off season. Well, we're about to be in season, and it's just going to kick off even more with camp starting next week. That's Don Callahan, the man of the moment. He'll be out watching high school practice at 8 a.m. at a field near you sometime, and Don will talk Saturday. It's going to be a fun Saturday. If nothing else, getting to hang out with you and John Bowman on YouTube Live.
Yes, and Money Mark, who never appeared, but this podcast was dedicated to you. All my efforts to Money Mark, who's not here.
We shall debate who is the new MVP for next week. But until then, support Johnny T-shirt, rate, review, subscribe, smash the like button, do all those type things. Help us out. We appreciate everybody. This is all for you guys. I'm all here for Don. We're all here for you.
I'm here for you, Tommy.
Well, I need some lunch, buddy.
All right. See you later.
So mail me, send the Uber Eats guy my way, and we'll talk Saturday.